Another of the great puzzles that lasted for about 100 years, in fact, well, it wasn't a puzzle for 100 years, it was settled doctrine, was what do you do with lobbying? And the answer was lobbying is corrupt. It was against the public policy of the United States. It was a felony in Georgia. It was a felony in California. And when a case came to the Supreme Court in the early 1880s, there'd been an old man too weak to travel from Virginia to Washington, D.C. to plead his case to get tens of thousands of dollars that he was owed back from the federal government. He hired a lawyer to go get his tens of thousands of dollars. The lawyer got his money back. The lawyer then asked to be paid, and he said, I'm not going to pay you. That was a corrupt contract to lobby. So the case goes all the way to the Supreme Court as a contract case. Can you enforce this contract to lobby? Well, there's certain kinds of contracts you can't enforce, like contracts to sell sex or babies or organs in some cases. These are contracts against public policy. And the Supreme Court decided that this contract to lobby was against public policy. Because, as they said, well, there's no evidence of bribery or anything in this case, but if we allow this gentleman to hire a lobbyist, well, the great corporations of our day will all hire adventurers. And they will make their case in the state houses. And every right-thinking man would call that corrupt. So that gradually fades away, and in this, Shakespeare in 30 Seconds version of American history, we're now in the 1970s, 1976. Benjamin Franklin thought the country would last 200 years. You didn't think he'd be so precise. Buckley versus Vallejo is decided. And the Supreme Court, for the first time, strikes down limits on campaign spending, limits that every European country has. They just take it for granted you can limit campaign spending. And then the last 40 years, we've had this fight about whether Congress can pass what Congress considers anti-corruption laws or not. And the court, especially in the last 10 years, has been striking them down because the court says they are not anti-corruption laws. Limits on campaign spending are not anti-corruption laws. Limits on corporate spending are not anti-corruption laws. And limits, in some cases, on contributions are not anti-corruption laws because this court, Justice Kennedy and Roberts and Scalia, believes that there's only one thing that is corrupt, and that's quid pro quo, fairly explicit bribery. So I think the house is on fire in terms of our democracy. And there's a lot of different ways that we can respond to this. My response in this book is to say, both as a letter to the court, but as a letter to ourselves, that fighting corruption is one of the best parts of the American tradition. And we should own that and not just think of it as a post-Watergate fight, but really as a post-War of Independence fight, and probably one of the most difficult fights that we'll ever be involved in.